The year is 1917 and World War I is raging. The small port of Halifax is bustling with life and maritime activity. But in one unpredictable moment, it will turn into the face of destruction. One explosion will turn neighborhoods into ashes and result in thousands of deaths. Let's uncover the details of the largest non-nuclear explosion in history and study the unimaginable suffering it brought. Halifax is the capital and largest city of the Canadian province of Nova Scotia, resting along the country's eastern coast. Its harbor, Halifax Harbor, is considered a lifeline connecting North America and Europe. During World War I, the strategic location of Halifax Harbor on the Atlantic Ocean made it the hub of maritime activity. It was an important port for the Royal Canadian Army as it housed war supplies, munitions, and troops for the ongoing war in Europe. It also hosted convoys traveling from North America to Europe and provided protection against the German U-boats. The harbor consisted of Bedford Basin, a huge enclosed bay, and the Narrows, the tightest part of the channel. The port was protected and ice-free, the perfect location for anchoring ships waiting to be fueled. With its population of 60,000 people, the small town of Halifax was buzzing with activity but was considered far from danger. Soon, this notion was destroyed. On December 6, 1917, at approximately 8:45 a.m., SS Imo, a Norwegian steamship carrying supplies for a World War I-era relief organization, collided with the French steamship SS Mont Blanc. In war times, accidents in busy seaports such as the Halifax Harbor were not uncommon. But things were different this time. What made the collision catastrophic was that Mont Blanc was carrying nearly 2,925 metric tons of explosives. And that's not it. The ship had 246 metric tons of benzol, 62 tons of gunpowder, 250 tons of trinitrotoluene, or TNT, and 2,367 metric tons of picric acid. Mont Blanc was practically a massive bomb sailing across the Atlantic Ocean. The explosives were destined for the French war effort. Given the astonishing quantity of explosives present on the vessel, the collision resulted in the most devastating man-made explosion before nuclear weapons. But how did it happen? The two vessels had traveled through the Halifax Harbor multiple times before. So what changed? The short answer is human error and miscommunication. Let's discuss the incident in detail. On the morning of December 6th, SS Imo began its departure from Halifax Harbor. It had arrived at the harbor a few days before for an inspection. The vessel was cleared to leave the port on December 5th, but the lack of coal load had delayed the departure. Imo was on an important mission. It was carrying relief supplies such as grain for Belgium. Across the hull, in big bold letters, was written Belgian Relief, indicating to German ships not to attack. Little did they know that it wouldn't even make it to the open sea. All outgoing vessels were supposed to follow the west channel of Halifax. But SS Imo decided to take the eastern Dartmouth path of the channel. As it emerged from the Bedford Basin and navigated through the Narrows, the ship found itself in an incorrect position. Mont Blanc, on the other hand, had arrived too late in the day to be allowed to enter the Bedford Basin, so it had to anchor outside the harbor. The submarine nets had already been raised for the night, so the vessel had no choice but to wait at the mouth of the harbor. If you don't know, submarine nets were placed across a harbor's mouth to protect against submarine attacks. In this case, submarine nets were lowered at the Halifax Harbor to protect ships against attack by German U-boats. At 7:30 a.m. on December 6th, the nets were lowered and Mont Blanc started to move inside the Bedford Basin. It was taking its rightful path, the Dartmouth side of the Narrows. The two ships faced each other while being only 1.5 kilometers apart. Thus began a series of panic-stricken signals and efforts of communication. Francis Mackey, Mont Blanc's pilot, insisted that his ship was on the right course. However, SS Imo signaled that it wouldn't yield. Having come so close to each other, both ships cut their engines off. But it was too late. The momentum of the two ships brought them closer to each other. As a result, the Imo struck the starboard side of Mont Blanc. Mont Blanc suffered a 3-meter gash, but that's not the worst part. During the collision, several barrels of benzol spilled all over the deck. Benzol is a highly flammable motor fuel. If exposed to heat or igniting sources, it can result in severe explosions. And that is exactly what happened. Dark vapors started evaporating from the deck, and Mont Blanc started burning. Spectators gathered near the shore to witness the ablaze. The Halifax Fire Department quickly responded, taking measures to extinguish the fire. Amidst this chaos, Mackey and his crew fled the ship. They were desperate to get in the lifeboats because they knew the level of destruction ahead. Warnings were given to firefighters, the people of nearby boats, and everyone stopping to watch, but noise and confusion made it impossible for them to understand the signals. Meanwhile, the burning Mont Blanc had drifted towards Pier 6 of Halifax Harbor, where residential homes and businesses lay in its path. At 9:04 a.m., the unfortunate Mont Blanc detonated with unimaginable force. The explosion was so powerful that it was felt across Nova Scotia. The explosion resulted in a tsunami, which washed over the Halifax and Dartmouth shores, exasperating the damage. The water rose at least 18 meters above the high water mark on the Halifax side of the harbor. The death toll was extensive. Around 2,000 people died in the explosion, 9,000 were injured, and many suffered from severe burns and trauma. The city's infrastructure was brought to its knees. Several kilometers of land was leveled, hospitals, schools, and buildings were destroyed. The blast damaged more than 12,000 houses, leaving 6,000 people without shelter. The number of people who had suffered from an eye injury or total blindness was horrifying. A total of 691 people suffered from eye injuries. 206 people lost one eye, whereas 41 were left completely blind. Over 2 weeks after the explosion, 250 eye removals were performed. Richmond was one of the most severely affected neighborhoods in the Halifax explosion. It occupied the northern extremity of Halifax and became the epicenter of this disaster. More than 2.5 kilometers of Richmond were completely wiped out. Critical buildings such as the Acadia Sugar Refinery and the Richmond Printing Company were obliterated. As if a tsunami wasn't enough, the aftermath of the Halifax explosion unfolded another chapter. Inside the collapsing houses, the stoves and lamps started fires all over Halifax. The blast had also ruptured gas lines, which combined with flammable material spread, and the rubble caught on fire. Total property damage was estimated to be $35 million. Meanwhile, the mighty Mont Blanc ship had been turned into a fireball. The large shank of the ship's anchor flew across the city, nearly 4 kilometers away. The SS Imo ship had also been obliterated, with not a single survivor. Halifax was surrounded by tragedy from all corners. In the aftermath of the explosion, relief efforts began. But something unexpected was also lurking around the corner. The city of Halifax didn't have enough resources to handle such a massive scale of destruction. They weren't well organized and did not have well-equipped emergency services in place for this kind of mass casualty. The city's mayor was away at the time, so Deputy Mayor John Cowell was next in command, but he had only 39 policemen. The fire department was also low on help as they had lost some of their men earlier in the explosion. In such difficult times, the Canadian military played a crucial role in coordinating and implementing immediate aid and rescue operations. Military personnel, including soldiers and naval units, established emergency shelters, provided first aid, and guarded people against looters. Moreover, they carried people out of rubble, saving countless lives. The local hospitals of Halifax were overwhelmed by the influx of thousands of injured people. Military personnel created makeshift hospitals on ships. From mild lacerations to severe burns and fatal injuries, there weren't enough doctors to treat all the patients. The international community stepped in. Trained doctors, nurses, medical supplies, food, and clothing were sent by governments from all over Canada, North England, and the United States. However, these rescue efforts were hindered by the worsening weather. A devastating blizzard struck the city one day after the incident. 16 inches of heavy snow covered the oily ruins. Relief efforts had already gotten underway the day before, but thousands were still injured, homeless, and trapped under the rubble. Snow-covered train tracks delayed the arrival of several relief trains from Boston and Eastern Canada. It is due to these conditions that approximately 250 bodies were never identified and many victims were never found. While rehabilitation efforts were going on, the families of victims demanded answers. An inquiry was launched and fingers were raised on both sides. The captain of the SS Imo ship was blamed for several reasons. An outbound ship is supposed to keep a speed of 5 knots, and evidence showed that it was sailing at a much quicker speed. Moreover, the vessel had deviated from the customary path and had refused to yield even when signaled by Mont Blanc. But this was only one side of the story. Lawyers hired by the owners of IMO argued that 3 men were responsible for the collision. They named Aimé Lemedec, the Mont Blanc's captain, Francis Mackey, the harbor pilot on board Mont Blanc, and F. Evan Wyatt, the naval officer in command of the harbor. All 3 men were arrested and charged with manslaughter. However, charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. The public opinion was divided. Since almost all of the crew of SS IMO had died during the explosion, it was easy to blame the surviving crew and captain of Mont Blanc since they had abandoned the ship to save their lives. In 1919, the Supreme Court of Canada reviewed the inquiry's conclusions and declared that both Mont Blanc and IMO were at fault. While we discuss the ones responsible for the collision, it is important to appreciate the unsung heroes who gave their lives to save others. One such brave soul was Vincent Coleman, a train dispatcher for the Canadian Government Railways. Coleman was in charge of the passenger rail traffic going in and out of the Halifax station. Coleman was aware of the contents of Mont Blanc, and despite knowing he would be in imminent danger, he remained at his post and sent a telegraph that saved hundreds of lives. He had realized that a train from New Brunswick was due to arrive in Halifax. Minutes before the vessel exploded, Coleman sent the following message: "Hold up the train. Ammunition ship of Iron Harbor making for Pier 6 and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys." As a result, the train was stopped and 300 lives were saved. Tragically, Coleman died in the explosion, but his selfless act will remain a testament to his bravery. The explosion of Halifax represents a dark chapter in maritime history. Several books and memoirs have been written by survivors, and their accounts continue to jolt readers. Halifax is once again thriving as a maritime city. Still, its history will forever be marked by the suffering of thousands. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.